Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. I hope you're having a phenomenal day and had a wonderful weekend. I know I certainly did. I got to spend some time with my family and this little guy. I just had a lot of good family time there, of course, but also got some good trades in too. So we're going to talk about some really nice profitable trades, some back-end data here, CME futures gaps that have been filled already, and then obviously the back-end 3-day and weekly timeframes, and rounded out, of course, with some liquidation and obviously a crypto market overview. So be sure to stick around. We got a really big one here today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end liquidation data, I'm going to go ahead and request something from you if you could find it in your heart to do so. We have a community member. His name is David, and his wife, Emily. She's 35 weeks pregnant with their third child, and she has a blood clot in her lungs. It's a very unfortunate situation. He's had to take care of her consistently and take time away from work. So it's been a very difficult situation for their family. So there's a link down below for this protected donation. Feel free to contribute. David, Emily, you're in my thoughts and prayers. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some polls here first, kind of get the baseline and start it off here with what your thoughts are. Crypto Twitter here, only about 45 minutes ago. We don't have a lot of votes because obviously people are kind of busy right now, but key takeaway here is 55% of you are thinking we're going to go higher and 45% are going to think you're going to go lower. Crypto YouTube, however, is much more bullish. I'm wondering how many influencers are talking about this amazing breakout we're seeing that I've been talking about for about 3 or 4 days. What they're saying here is that, yes, we want to send it. 67% of you are thinking we're going to go higher. So the overall scenario here is that we are going higher. I totally get that. I'm siding with you, of course. I've been, I talked about that this weekend. In fact, quick congrats to our community members here for some nice profits on our SUI long, 25%, 50% from a Dogecoin trade from 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, and our recent BNB trade hit about 20% there too. And if you didn't notice, BNB is the front runner for most altcoins. It was pumping this weekend, and altcoins are now following suit. Pretty standard stuff. But when we look at liquidations, though, we can see there's a 2-to-1 ratio here for shorts versus longs on ETH. But there's a 5-to-1 ratio for shorts versus longs on Bitcoin. So a lot of people were shorting Bitcoin and got hammered here recently. It makes sense, of course, why people are shorting because we have a strong amount of resistance in this current 110 to 112K range, but it's not enough to consider a short position because the descending trend line has been broken. You honor the trend line, folks. That's the key takeaway here. If you're going to do anything, don't look at these magical Elliott wave, theories. Look at trends. The trend is your friend. It's simple as that. So looking here at the trend right now, we can still see we're in a fear market, though. You got to recognize that. 42 is the fear and greed index here, basically letting us know that people are still scared to buy. With good reason, we're in a descending trend, sort of, and I get the concept, but generally speaking, you want to buy the fear and sell the greed. That's the concept right now. So this kind of ties into altcoin season index too, just letting us know that our crypto market cap for altcoins is at 1.65 trillion now. As long as we stay over 1.5 trillion as a rough estimate, we're in pretty darn good shape. And to me, this is personally just something that's looking like a very good sign here. Okay, majority of altcoins are performing better than Bitcoin. Sure, there are some outliers, of course, but for the most part, we're seeing a lot of money still flowing into altcoins as the price continues lower for Bitcoin. And it's usually a good sign for altcoins. Now, take a look here at the weekly time frame. This is just kind of a previous divergence that is starting to converge in a sense. In other words, our previous week high at roughly 109K. Basically, we saw about 2 months worth of resistance at 109,000. That's the new support level for us. So as of the weekly time frame, we've closed above that range, and it's a very good sign. Albeit we didn't have a bullish engulfing candle, so it's not like a true confirming, breakout or bounce, but we're still in good shape. We're over some moving averages there too. So this actually looks very good. When we take a look here on the 3-day as well, we can recognize we're also maintaining above these moving averages, and things are looking pretty peachy here in the overall sense. Now take a look at the back end here for CME futures, specifically Solana, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. Bitcoin, starting on the left-hand side, filled its $112,000 gap. So we can kind of just avoid that altogether. That was forming over the weekend, but never fully closed in the red. We can see, though, 114 to 117 is still that current CME gap from before. So from roughly what I think it was like maybe about coming up on 2 to 3 weeks ago, we can see that was a previous gap. The same thing as well for Ethereum and Solana. Both these gaps were fully filled and the price action fully recovered. So we don't have any open CME gaps with Solana and Ethereum, and one left remaining from 114 to 117 for Bitcoin. So that's kind of the back end data there here. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the front end, or more so the liquidation levels for Bitcoin first, and then we can kind of look at the charts. So Starting with Bitcoin, on the right-hand side here, we got open interest. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit and look at our 1-month time frame and just give us some perspective on some resistance ranges here. Now, if you didn't notice this already, that's the local high, but also currently that open interest range, 113,000 is that local resistance for us. I'll show you on the charts what that looks like. We're printing a cup and handle pattern leading into that resistance. Distinct probability we break out from here, but once more, we just got to know that that's a heavy resistance, okay? Now, we're starting to also see the momentum shift happen here as well, where liquidation long delta is shifting to now 3 billion in the green versus 3 billion in the red not 4 hours ago. Okay, so it's a very good sign in the overall sense. And we look here as well, 115K, once more, is still that resistance range for us, but also a heavy concentration of liquidation above the price. So overall, I think we're more likely to continue higher here for Bitcoin based on these metrics alone. Now let's take a look at the front end here on Bitcoin and kind of recognize where we're at. We've already looked at the daily time frame we've already looked at the 3-day and the weekly. Now looking here at the 1-day time frame, we can recognize we're up over the 20-day SMA, which is super important. We're also approaching 50 in the RSI. So this is an important thing here too. We can close above this level, roughly that 112.5K today. We're going to be in pretty good shape. We can also see MACD has converged. Keep in mind, this was weekend price action, which is still low volume in most cases. And that's just generally speaking a positive early sign. It's not an indicative sign, but it's still very strong because we look at the lower time frames, we are seeing more money flowing into the price action here. And we can see our money flow index is right there with the RSI. The key takeaway here is that we're over 50 in the RSI in the 4-hour time frame. We're starting to see stochastic top out for a tentative rejection here. But more importantly, everything that we see here so far outside the 200-day SMA, which is there at about 114,000, is a very, very good situation. We're above the cloud, we're above our moving averages, and the overall sentiment here is that the price action should continue higher, albeit we may see a correction initially first. Because once again, you can see 113,000, strong resistance. We've seen this level tested once, twice, and 3 times, right? So overall, the 3rd time you test a resistance, it's typically more likely to break. So we are probably going to see a breakout here soon, but it's difficult to want to take a long into a resistance. So I totally get it. Maybe consider waiting on the sidelines in this one here. But that is my thoughts on Bitcoin. What are yours? Why don't you comment below and let me know. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community. And the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here at Ethereum next. Now, Ethereum is one of those crazy coins right now that's not performing super well. It's in a lower support range of 4,300, but it's not looking like there's a ton of signs here on the back end so far that it's just going to break out. So be mindful, this coin may be one to skip out on, but let's double check and make sure to verify that first. So once more, as far as open interest is concerned, we can see, let's go ahead and make this a little bit more clear. We've got a heavy amount of open interest at 4,375, but obviously the most at 4,500. So we may see some rejection at the $4,400 range. And once more, previous to that, 4,500 has been and continues to be that local resistance for us. Okay, so that's the 1 month's worth of open interest, kind of reinforcing resistance above the price. We can see liquidation short delta is still at about 6 billion. So there's more shorts than longs on Ethereum. And we can also recognize too that there's liquidation both above and below the price. Majority of the local liquidation has been swept though. So it would make sense for the price to kind of stall out and kind of hang out until Bitcoin makes a move. Let's double check here though really quick and understand kind of where we're at. This is that bearish type of rectangle pattern that we're seeing here, where we're working ourselves into a range between 4,500 and roughly 4,300. All that said though, if we can't pass this center line here and reclaim this, then the likelihood of further downside is quite high. So not proposing necessarily short here, but the better, safer play is to consider a short position on Ethereum, as crazy as it is to say that. So just keep in mind, this coin is looking pretty weak. If we can't reclaim 4,400 sometime today, then I think there's a distinct probability we're going to continue lower. Okay, so just not a phenomenal situation here. While we have broken above some key levels and we're back up over 50, these are pretty weak indications that we're back on track. And we do take a look at the daily time frame, we're still barely maintaining this center line here at 50 in the RSI. So once more, there's not a lot here telling us that this is a good viable option to take along. Okay, so just some things to be mindful of there. Let's take a look here at Solana next. Take a look at the back end here for Solana, 210, to 205 to 215. Those are basically 3 heavy concentrations. Easy way to understand is 205 to 215, now that we've reclaimed that zone, is considered to be a strong support range. So further upside does make sense for this coin based on the simple fact that we have more support below us. And if we take a look at liquidation delta, we've shifted from basically 2.5 billion to approximately 2 billion in the green from the red essentially here in the last, that's roughly just 12 hours. So it's been a pretty significant shift there. And if we take a look here, majority of all liquidation here locally has been fully swept. We've got each one of these blue bars is about $2 billion. So there's probably about 10 to 15 billion that got hit hard between 210 and 215. So once more, as I mentioned previously, don't consider shorting this coin, even though it looked very weak 24 to 48 hours ago. It's showing a lot of strength right now. And even though it broke below its ascending trend line, it's still establishing higher highs and higher lows, okay? So that's the important thing to kind of recognize. Now we take a look here at the daily. Just to quickly note, still above 50 on the RSI. Once more, the macro is still looking strong here for this coin. Money flow index pivoted there and MACD is converging. So those are all good, strong signs here for us. 4-hour time frame showing some overextension. So hypothetically, we see a pullback here soon because we're leading into our previous high. So our previous high was 218. We hit like 216 and some change here recently. So it would make sense for the price to pull back a little bit, potentially be able to see a cup and handle pattern or some type of flag pattern here soon. So once more, if you're going to consider shorting this coin, make sure it's a tighter short and you're not trying to get too crazy with it. But for the most part here, this coin shows a lot of strength and there's no real indication that you want to consider taking a short position on this coin. It would be considered to be a high risk. Now, if you want to take a long right now, that's technically lower risk, but you're taking a long into a key level resistance. So me personally, I like to avoid coins that look like this. So what I would be looking for is a bounce off of our local high. So kind of pay attention to that. If we see that retrace to 210 to 212, that's a consideration for long there, potentially even 208, 209 for that fair value gap to get filled. But those are kind of areas of interest for myself if I were to consider a trade on Solana. Let's go and move on to SUI, see what's going on here on the back end data for SUI. Now, keep in mind, this once again is the monthly open interest. We got a lot of resistance above the price. 380 is more specifically that area, but even though open interest doesn't reflect 360, that has been a notoriously strong resistance for us. So I've got that put on the charts there. I sent that out on my playout chart earlier too. But the key takeaway here is that we want to be mindful that 360 is a kind of a strong area there of resistance. Now, if you don't know this already, we did take some nice profits on SUI, and that was a trade that we took in the low what is it, 335? I forget the exact entry, I apologize. But we took a long in the support range here in a 335. And the whole point of that was to essentially make sure that we understand that this level has been a notoriously strong support, the low 330s, and it's a good area to consider dollar cost averaging. So all that being said, when we look at the open interest areas here, we recognize we got resistance at 380, but we've also got a lot of liquidation between now and 370. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see 360 at least, possibly even 370, 380 in this relative near future here for this push higher. The key takeaway I would say also with this coin is that we've broken our descending trend line. We've bullishly backtested our horizontal trend line there too with our support. And we look at the macro too, even though the macro was looking pretty poor this weekend, we've reclaimed 20 on the RSI and we're now right here at 50 on the RSI. So closing at this 350 mark today would probably put us in a better position to see further upside from this coin. So ultimately we see a lot of good convergences here, some early signs of reversal. The main thing is that descending trend line break and a consolidation between 330 and 320. So that's a good little area there to have considered a long position. Once again, congrats to our community members who were able to get into that position there. Keep in mind too, as well, if you're part of my Discord and you're part of my community members, we have trade alerts here specifically for a reason. Like I literally told you everything about this trade here before we took the trade. So you got to understand it's all there for you. Make sure you use that and read through those trade alerts so you can learn a lot from that. The whole point is to educate you on why I take the trades that I take. Okay, so that's all linked down below there for you if you want to become part of our community, basically our premium group. So let's take a look at XRP. Let's kind of round this out here and see what's going on here with XRP. The truth is 295 is that local area of open interest. That is potentially a resistance level for XRP. In other words, $2.95 to $3 is that local resistance. Now, do you just short into $3 because it's a resistance level? Not necessarily. If we have a lot of volume to reflect a potential shift in momentum, maybe a different story. And we do technically. We've got 1.2 billion in longs here in the market right now versus shorts. So it basically tells us if you count up all the longs and the shorts together, there's 1.2 billion more in longs versus shorts. So it shows strength in the fact that we may actually be able to surpass $3. However, outside of liquidation, upwards about 320, we got to recognize that $3 has been a strong amount of resistance. And if we zoom out, if I recall correctly, $3 is that point of control. Let's go ahead and double check. Yeah, 307 now, but also 301. So you could average that out to just say 305 as a close approximate, or 303 more specifically. That's the area of resistance for us. So while we could continue to go a little bit higher here, there's a strong chance we reject out of that level first. Okay, so just know that exists. We are above the cloud. We broke our descending trend line. So a lot of reasons why the price is more likely to go higher. But if you look at some previous timeframes for this coin, it has broken above the descending trend line before and just immediately turned around. So please understand this coin can be heavily manipulated just because market makers are really good at suppressing the price. But we look at the MACD, we're converging on the daily time frame. We can also see we're increasing above 50 in the RSI. These are a lot of good signs here letting us know that this trend reversal is not only happening, but is likely to stick around. Okay. The key takeaway I would say is the amount of volume here. The volume is increasing, and you want to follow the volume. Okay, so pay attention to volume on this coin. Let's go ahead and round out a couple more. Actually, while we got some time here, let's go ahead and check out Chainlink really quick. Kind of get some perspective on the back end here for this guy. We can see $23 is that current point of control there, basically that level of open interest locally, but also 24 is the next area of resistance. We're seeing liquidation delta shift to break even. This is usually a very, very good sign in wanting to take a long position. So that's a very awesome situation there. Generally speaking, when you see that, it implies further upside. And we look here, we can see 24 to 2450 is that next area of continuation potential. Now, when I say continuation potential, those are areas of liquidation, and oftentimes that will work as a magnet for the price action to continue in that direction. But we do take a look at the macro perspective here. We can see 2330 is that point of control here locally, basically letting us know that ever since we've been in this range, it's been roughly about a month, that we have seen a lot of resistance in that level. Okay, so a lot of continuation potential here, but we got to get past 2330 first to be able to have any legs to stand on. It's a simple way to understand it. Now, $23.30 is that local resistance, but if we look at the daily time frame, we're tentatively breaking bullish here. MACD is not converging, but we're seeing stochastic with a third stochastic swing to the upside, and money flow index increasing too. So that does imply that even though there's been a lot of selling pressure here locally, we're seeing more buying pressure in the last 24 to 48 hours. Those are ultimately good signs. So this coin, while it hasn't broken bullish yet, I'm going to be interested in a long in the $23 range, potentially in the next 24 hours if we can get above the cloud and maintain a good price point in this current range. I think it's just a little too premature to take a long at resistance though. Those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Last thing we want to look at here is BNB too, and this is another one of those coins that we did take a trade with. I mentioned this earlier. We took 3 take profit targets, played it very tight on our long position just because I don't like taking longs this high in the price point. But the concept there, and the reason why I mentioned that, is because BNB is a front runner for most altcoins. As you can see, look how well it's been doing prior to any of these other coins breaking out. Right? It's like the early indication. So generally speaking, that was like kind of the fundamental catalyst in a lot of ways for us to take our secondary or tertiary longs there too, right? So what I'm getting at here is that BNB looks super strong. We can see our local high here at about 873. That's the new low for us here in this 0.618 fib level. So one thing I want to kind of reiterate and reaffirm, I'm sure you probably roll your eyes right now because you've heard me say this before, but fib levels mean very little unless they have confluence. So just to keep in mind here, this is a golden pocket. Yes, awesome, cool, wonderful. But it doesn't matter too much unless you have confluence, which is basically this previous high. In other words, previous highs work as new lows, oftentimes with retests, and that area is held strong. So hypothetically or hindsight, obviously 2020, you could have longed at 873, 874 and had some success, right? That's the concept there once key levels are broken. So just some friendly advice there. If you're going to be using Fibonacci retracement levels, try to find other confirming factors at those levels, and there's increased strength in those levels, right? It's not just, a placebo like most things are in trading to try to make, trick newer traders into thinking there's something to it. There's no one size fit all kind of indicators, folks. But if you can identify support and resistance levels, those are probably the most impactful things you can look at. Let's look at the back end here for BNB and we'll call it a day. So we can see a lot of open interest, 880 and 863. Those are 2 heavy areas of support or resistance. Liquidation long deltas at 500 million, basically telling us more people taking longs. And obviously we see this little bit of liquidation upwards of about 890 to 900. So overall, at this point, I think there is going to be a turning point. We're probably going to see BNB pull back in the relative near future, just based on tons of liquidation on the downside. But once more, it all depends on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin isn't going to pull back, BNB won't either. This coin is very strong. It's not a coin you want to try to consider shorting into. If I were to consider a short, I'd wait for 900 just because it makes sense to try to short the local high if and when that's retested the first time. Those are just kind of some standard trading 101 things. So hopefully this makes sense. I described everything correctly. Thanks again so much for being an awesome part of my life. And I appreciate you being wonderful and excellent in the comments. Welcome aboard to all the new community members too. We got over 100 subscribers over the weekend. It was really awesome. So thanks again. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. We'll take care of yourself. Bye-bye.